Hi everyone, I'm Ron Canner and you're watching Out of Zion on God TV. It was Yom Kippur 1973. The nation was fasting. Most Israelis were praying in the synagogue. It was the perfect time for Egypt and Syria to strike Israel. They had both suffered a humiliating defeat in the Six-Day War. Egypt lost the entire Sinai Desert and Syria the precious Golan Heights. Today, we'll focus on one of the most amazing tank battles in history, right here on the Golan Heights. This area was strategic to Syria because they could both cut off a good amount of Israel's water supply and relentlessly bomb the Jewish nation. 10 days before Yom Kippur, on Rosh Hashanah Eve, Israeli Brigadier Commander Avigdor Kahalani was concerned. Most of the Israeli generals felt that war was not imminent. Kahalani, however, felt a Syrian attack would come on Yom Kippur. So, on Yom Kippur, he toured the Nafach area, the military base where my daughter served. Around 2 p.m. on the first day of the war, the Syrians began to attack from the valley of Quneitra, just over the border. They made great progress battling through the upper regions of the Golan Heights. Their advanced weapons caught the Israelis by surprise. We were completely outmatched against the superior Syrian mechanized force. They had more than 50,000 men and 1,200 of the most modern tanks, whereas Israel had just a few hundred. Meanwhile, buses on the one day of the year where there was no traffic began to collect reservists. Because it was Yom Kippur, it wasn't difficult to locate soldiers, as most of them would be in their hometown. My wife was in the 3rd grade, and she remembers that suddenly the whole sky turned black, and trucks gathered all the men with taliyot, prayer shawls, from their synagogue. She said that they went to the shelter as her mother hovered over her. It was all too terrifying. On the 2nd and 3rd day of the battle, Israel held off the Syrian attack. But I want to share with you what happened on the 4th day, right here in the Valley of Tears. On October 9th, the Syrians unleashed their largest artillery barrage yet, using both rockets and air power. That was to soften things up for the tanks. More than 100 were unleashed against the depleted Israeli forces. Fighting was intense all day, and Israel was taking on more and more casualties. A tank battalion commander, 29-year-old Lieutenant Colonel Avigdor Kahalani, had been called in to join the battle. His 7th Battalion could see the Syrian tanks. Kahalani called for other tanks to join him in the attack. No one responded. Now, it may have been a radio frequency issue, or maybe his men were simply too exhausted and couldn't muster the emotional strength to continue. He found himself alone against several Syrian tanks. If the Syrian tanks could come up out of the valley and take that high ground, that would be it. They would have controlled the Golan Heights. His team took out one tank and then another. A 3rd tank had Kahalani's tank in its crosshairs, and Kahalani's gun jammed. However, the Syrian tank suddenly burst into fire as other Israeli tanks, encouraged by Kahalani's courage and success, finally responded. Kahalani ordered a sergeant to move forward to block the Syrian advance, but the sergeant told him he was out of shells. Kahalani told him to go anyway, that the Syrians would not attack if they saw his tank. Kahalani continued forward. A few tanks followed him, but others were retreating. They took out 2 Syrian tanks, and suddenly more Israeli tanks joined him. The Syrian tanks were 900 meters away. Kahalani ordered his men only to fire on moving tanks. The Syrians unleashed a barrage. However, after the attack, Kahalani could see no Syrian tank moving forward. It was theirs to take, but for some reason they retreated. Of the 500 Syrian tanks that were lost, 260 of them were in this valley, which was renamed the Valley of Tears in honor of those Israeli soldiers who fell in battle. General Raphael Eitan told Kahalani's 7th Brigade over the radio, "You have saved the people of Israel." While General Avigdor Kahalani told Kahalani, "You are the true savior of the people of Israel." He received Israel's highest military honor, the Medal of Valor. Shalom from atop a former Syrian tank.